A new F-104 starfighter screams into War Thunder. Let's take a look at the Italian F-104G. The first thing to say is that there are currently 3 versions of the F-104G in War Thunder. The Germans get one, the Chinese get one from Taiwan, and the Italians get one. The 3 planes have very similar performance, but the weapon loadouts are completely different, and the Chinese version has different radar and no countermeasures. In this review, we're focusing only on the Italian F-104G added in the Direct Hit update. But since this is my first review on an F-104, a lot of this will be relevant to the other F-104G versions. Now, when I was a kid, the F-104 was always the cool plane. It was kind of weird looking, it was called the Starfighter, it had those neat trapezoid wings and all the trivia tidbits about how sharp the leading edges were, so on and so on. It was designed and first flew in the early 1950s, came into service in 1958, and served all the way until 2004. In fact, the very last user was Italy. Now, I'll go into more detail about the development and history of the F-104 generally when I finally get around to reviewing the American starfighters, but for now, I'm just going to focus on the Italian F-104G model. As you may be aware, the F-104 was produced in fighter, recon, and fighter bomber versions. This is one of the fighter bomber versions, and it was quite popular. Over 1,000 F-104Gs were produced, and hundreds of them served with Italy. The G model differs from the base F-104 by featuring considerable internal structural changes to increase the plane's rigidity, both because of the need to carry more heavy weapons externally, and also in response to some serious safety issues that came up with the F-104 in service. It carries the North American Search and Ranging Radar Model R-15, which is just called the NASRR in War Thunder for whatever reason. This is a pretty basic radar set with pretty average features and performance. It has IFF, a basic narrow-angle BVR mode, and the ACM boresight mode. Range isn't great, but it doesn't need to be, and ground clutter is still a thing, but that's fine since you only have IR missiles. The F-104 carries the M61 Vulcan Cannon with 750 rounds, which is respectable. I'll confess that I've always had a hard time aiming the M61 in War Thunder for some reason, but this is a powerful gun with a generous warehouse full of ammunition, so you can fire hose some serious damage with this thing. Now, for external weapons, the plane has a huge number of weapon loadouts available. You can take a good selection of unguided rockets, dumb bombs, and the usual F-104 tip winders. The G model gets a ballistics computer with the CCIP for its bombs and rocket pods. Remember, this is a fighter-bomber version, so before you get all smug about, oh, bombs on a fighter, you're supposed to take them with this one. For missiles, you get the AIM-9B and eventually graduate to the AIM-9J, which is a considerably better weapon. The AIM-9J has an uncaged seeker and can slave to your radar set to help get weapons lock, but to be honest, the plane's radar is basic enough that it can have trouble maintaining a radar lock in dogfights sometimes, so this might not be as practical with the F-104G in practice as it is on paper. Still, the AIM-9J is a pretty good missile, and it should do good work for you. Now, taking the F-104G out on missions gives you some options. You absolutely can just fly this thing out with the tip winders and do air superiority with it. That's legit, and it works. However, since the G model has credible ground attack loadouts and the ballistics computer, in my opinion, it's best suited for use in the fighter-bomber role, like it was intended. I generally took a pretty routine mission profile. Fly in, dump my bombs, look around for air targets to scavenge. I'm pleased to say that the F-104G worked out a lot better for me than I expected. I haven't used any of the F-104s in a while, so its performance wasn't something I'm used to, and I had to adjust my playstyle, but once I did, it worked pretty well for me, and I was able to reliably grind some good RP with it. The key to using the F-104 is, quite simply, speed. Just don't slow down. The plane seems to turn better at higher speeds, and it retains energy pretty well. It has enough countermeasures to simply run from engagements you don't want to get wrangled in most of the time, so that's a good thing too. The plane has enough speed down on the deck that you should really be able to, just pop some ground targets, dump your bombs on most missions before going after air targets, and this may end up being a pretty good RP grinder for you. In terms of air targets, the name of the game is boom and zoom. You can do some basic turn fighting with the AIM-9Js if you're careful at managing your speed, but while you still have the AIM-9Bs, or after you fire both your Js and you're stuck with guns, try to use high-speed passes. And if you don't get a good shot, just don't shoot. Fly through and go back for another pass later. The plane is just overflowing with raw power, so use it. The landing performance will take some getting used to. You're going to get a speed warning at, wait for it, just under 800 kilometers an hour. Seriously. If you're cruising in at 600 kmh, the game tells you that you're too slow and gonna crash. Now, the plane has good air brakes, and you can drop flaps and gear around 500 kmh, so practice a few times and don't be nervous about touching down at speeds which might feel a bit unsafe. Out in real life, landing the F-104 was pretty dangerous, and the plane was known as a widowmaker, so if you have trouble flying with its flaky landing performance sometimes, don't sweat it. After you sit down, the plane has a drag chute, so you'll be able to counter that extra speed pretty easily. Visually, the F-104G is nothing special. The default skin, well, I really don't like it at all. The weird white and silver two-tone thing looks kind of haphazard, and it looks like more of the plane should be white. There's a better skin available for GEs, but I just use the basic one anyway. The cockpit is also nothing special. Visibility is good, but the layout's pretty unexciting, and, the radar scope is simplistic. It's not bad, it's just not special. To close out with the Italian F-104G, this plane has credible multi-role weapon loads, and can perform the fighter-bomber role it was designed for pretty effectively. It's crazy fast, and has a generous supply of countermeasures. However, it only has 2 air-to-air missiles regardless of loadout. Its radar is pretty basic, and if you slow down, you're gonna have a bad day. The final verdict on the F-104G in the Italian tech tree really is that it's a well-rounded plane with a unique playstyle. If you spend a little bit of time to learn its quirks, you can do really good work with it, and you'll have some great fun. As always, thanks for watching.